Hello guys and welcome once again to another tutorial. So today we are going to be looking at functions in C. So when we talk about a function in C, we are referring to a block of code that performs a specific function. Okay, so if for example we have a file called C functions, and then we ask our editor to display it for us. So we could have something like this: include, then so guys, this is what we refer to as a function in C. This is a function, okay? It's a block of code that performs a specific function. Now in C we have two types of functions. We have what we refer to as a standard library function and the user-defined functions. So we are going to first of all look at the standard library functions. When we refer to the function as a standard library function in C, we are referring to the functions that are built into the C program. So these are functions that are defined in a header file. So for example, if you remember, I mentioned that the first line of our code, the include tag we have here, is asking us to reference the standard input output header file in order to be able to perform a particular function, and that is in order to be able to use this function. So print f. In order to be able to use this function, we have to include this standard library function in our program in order to be able to use it. So that is a standard library function, print f. Another standard library function could be the square root. So let's say we want to find the square root of a number. This is how we define that one too. sqrt, then you open and close your parentheses. And if we are going to do that, that means that we have to bring another include here. So instead of including, we can include the math.h header in order to be able to use this standard library function. So this is what we refer to as standard library functions. Functions that are built in to the C program and they are defined in the header file. Okay, so guys, that is what we refer to as standard library functions. I'll attach a link to help you browse through all the available standard library functions in the description. So you can look over there to get more information on the standard library functions. So now, the next type of functions, as I mentioned earlier, is user-defined functions. User-defined functions are functions you as a developer create based on your need. Okay, you create the function to execute a particular task for you. And why is it important to use functions in C? Basically, writing functions makes your work as a developer easier. It makes your code easier to understand. It makes it easier to maintain, and it makes it easier to debug. So that is what makes functions very useful in C programming or any other programming language for that matter. So what is the structure of a user-defined function? Okay, let us look at the structure of a user-defined function. So let's use this image to look at the structure of a user-defined function. Okay, so this is the image I created to look at what a user-defined function is. So with a user-defined function, we have it written in this format. Okay, so you have the function declaration, that is the name, then you put the code, and then you go on to write your main function. Guys, you remember that I mentioned in an earlier tutorial that the C program runs mainly from the main function. So you can declare your function on top or below, but it is going to start executing from the main function. So when you declare your user function like this, you are now going to call it in the main. So you call it in the main this way. So int main, then you write your block of code, then where you want to call the function, you call it just like this. Then you continue with your code and close with your closing block. Now, this is how it works. The system is going to start running your code from here. So it will read here. Then when it gets to this particular part, the main function is going to relegate the program operation to your function you defined called function name. So that is what this array is saying. It is going to now, because it has gotten to this line, it is going to relegate the functioning to this block of code you have here in the function name. Then it runs the code inside there, and when it hits this closing block, it is going to come back into the main function and continue on the next line to run. So that is the basic structure of a user-defined function. Let's try it in Emacs and see. Okay, so now we are going to Emacs into our file C function, and now that it is opened, I'm just going to zoom in a bit. Let's quickly create our include statement, and then I want it to include the stdio.h, and then this is my function. So I'm going to give it a name, a function. Okay guys, remember function names must be unique. Don't just give it any bad name. You need to give it a unique name so that it makes it explanatory when someone is reading your code. So I open my code block, then I write my function here. Why don't I indent it? Function here, and then I finish executing my code, and then I close it. So now I have declared my function or written my function. Okay, now how am I going to use it in my project? Int main, then I open my braces, then I write my line of code, and when I get to where I want to call the function, I just do a function, and then I close it and come down and close my project. That is assuming that is where I want my project to end. I don't want it to go beyond this. I just want it to end here. So guys, this is how you use a user-defined function in C. You can create your function either on top like this one, or you can decide to create your function below. So I can just come down after this and then maybe open my comments, create a function. Okay, then I define the function void new function, and then open my braces and write my function code here and close it. Okay, this is another way you declare. But when you are going to use the function this way, then something must come in. Okay, so that is what we are going to go into next. So what have we looked at so far? We have looked at what standard library functions are, and then how to create a user-defined function. Okay. Okay, guys. So now we are going to practicalize everything with code. Okay. So let me mark into our file C function. Before that, let me rename it so that we can use it. C underscore func to C underscore function dot C. And when we clear this and then marks C underscore function dot C. Our mark is opened. Good. So we have this. This is the code from the previous activity. Now let's practicalize it. So I want to create a function to, let's say, subtract numbers. Okay, to subtract numbers. So I'm going to go with the first step. I'm leaving this here, and then now let me declare my function. So void subtract age. Then I'm going to say that I want subtract age to have int a, then int b. I have defined my variables. Let me use them in my function. What I want is int result, declaring another variable. Then result is going to be equal to a minus b. Guys, remember your arithmetic operators. Then I'm going to ask my function to return, you guessed it, the result. After which I have to close my function. So this is my function declared. I have given it a name, declared my variables, then declared the final variable. So this is how I want it to work. So when I come to the main file, that is the main function, I want it to first of all take int. I have to declare some variables again, guys. Int n1, n2, then sum. Okay, so there should be a comma here. Instead of n, let me make it very age 1, age 2. And then I'm not looking for a sum because I want to subtract, so difference. All right, so difference. Then I'm going to ask my program, let me remove this so that we have clean code. So now print f, enter ages. Then I close it. Then I'm going to ask it to scan the input. So we have the format specifier for int is D, and because there are two, we are adding another D, closing it. Then we print out age 1, age 2, close. Then I close this one. After this is for me to take input from my user. All right, So the next thing for me to now do is difference will be equal to, what is the name of my function? Subtract age. So let me reduce that a little. This is cool. We can do this so that you see my function here. I'm going to say subtract age, open my parenthesis, then age 1, age 2, and close it. So over here, what I've done is call my function subtract age to perform the calculation I've put into this function here. So you see that I'm not going to be writing this there. I'm just giving it a function. So that is one part done. Now, when we do this, it doesn't mean that we are going to get the result. We have to now ask our system to print out the result. Then difference is, then I bring in my format specifier for int, close it, then this, close this, and finally return my success message, which is 0. Okay, so this is how we write and use a user-defined function in C. So let's go through it. Here we give the function, we declare the function, or we define the function. That is, the name is subtract age. Put in some parameters, integer a, integer b. Then we have declared a variable here, integer result. Now we are saying that result is going to be equal to a minus b, and what is going to return is the result for us. Then I go into my main function where I want to use my defined function. I declare integer variables age 1, age 2, and then difference. Then I ask the user to input the ages, and also ask my program to read the input from the user. Now when the input is read, I am asking my program to give me the result of this, which is going to be the function subtract age of age 1. That is what the user is going to input, and then age 2, the next value the user is going to input. Then when it finishes with the subtraction, it is going to print out the result in this format. Difference is. Okay, so instead of writing it this way, let me say age difference is. Then I give the this, then I'm asking it to return 0 if it's successful. So I'm saving my function, then exit. So now we are going to compile it and see how it is going to work. Okay, now guys, I just remembered I didn't ask it to print to a new line, and that might pose a problem. So let me just do that quickly over here. So what I'm going to ask for is to a new line, and then to a new line, and save this and exit. So now we can compile our code as usual, output it to run func, then call our file, okay, so it's come good. Then if there's no problem, okay guys, so we have an error here, and then I've gone through the error. It is saying that warning return with the value in function returning void. So result is going to be void. Note declared here void subtract age int a int b. In function main, void value not ignored as it ought to be this. Okay, so let's call the file to see where our challenge is. Okay, so we have this. Let me zoom in and then we see. All right, so guys, if you look at this, we are referencing void as the return type. So we are saying nothing, but what we are doing is performing arithmetic operations involving integers. So the correct thing should be int. That should be our return type. Okay, so we save this and then let me clear my, and now we can gcc and run func c underscore function dot c, and it has gone through. So now let's run it. Run func, enter ages 16 9, and you see the age difference is 7. So if you calculate it yourself, you see that it is correct. 16 minus 9 is 7. We can still run it again if you didn't get what happened. Let me zoom in for us to be able to see. Run func, enter ages. I'm going to enter 5 and then 12. The age difference is minus 7. Okay, so it is just performing arithmetic operations using the function I declared. All right, guys, so that is basically what our program is doing. I can Emacs that file for us to compare and see what's happening. So let me move this to this side, bring this here, and let us read line by line. So we asked our system to include a standard input-output header file, and then we declared our function, that is a typical user-defined function. So int is my return type. I want it to return an integer. And then my function name is a subtract age. I've given it variables a and b. Then I'm saying that the result of my int should be a minus b, and then it should return result. In our main function, I have declared 3 integer variables, age1, age2, and different. Then I have asked our user to input the ages, and that is what has happened here or here. Okay, these two portions are showing us the inputs. So you input the two numbers. Then I'm asking the system to scan this value. So it will scan and keep them in memory. And then now I want to know the difference between the ages. So it is going to run the subtract function, this function here. And how is it going to run the subtract function? It is going to pick the value for age 1, and that is going to represent a in the subtract function, and then the value for age 2, which is going to be b. So it has picked age 1, age 2, and so what it is going to do is put those values here and perform this function here, a minus b. So the a minus b is what we are going to get as the return. So now when it provides the return, we are going to get age difference is this, and that is what we have here. All right, so this is basically how you write a user-defined function and use it in your code. Okay guys, so now that we know how to define or create a user-defined function and then use it in the program, a C program, let's look at another option. What if I want to declare my function after my main function? So I'm going to bring my code here, remove this, then I'll bring my main on top, then come here to declare my user function again. So I only want my function to come in after my main function. So declare function, to subtract. So int subtract age, then I open my braces and I tell it int res, and come here and say res equal to a minus b, and let's quickly go back and then declare them here int a, int b. All right, so that we know what we are going to do with it. Now I am done with my calculation. The next thing is to write my return statement, return res, and then I close my function. So guys, this is the function in a nutshell, but in a different format. I wrote my int function and the main function before declaring my own function. So in order to be able to use my function in the main function, I have to bring in what we call a function prototype. So what I will do is say int subtract age and then int a, int b, and close it. So guys, you see that I brought my function prototype before the main. Now why am I using the function prototype? The function prototype is telling the main function that, the function prototype is telling the compiler that a function is going to be called later in the program. So when it is executing, it should look out for such a function, subtract age. So when you are going to use your function in this manner, that is, you want to declare your function only after you have provided your main function, like this at the end of your main function, then it is good to bring in your function prototype. So this is what we call a function prototype. It is just this. You write this over there. So now when I save it and exit, we are going to get the same output like before. So let me run, compile our code, function.c. Good, compiled. Let me clear so that we have space, and then dot run func, enter ages 67, 46. Then you press enter. The age difference is 21. You see? So no matter how you declare the function, it is going to work. Just remember that if your user-defined function is coming at the end of the main function, then you have to declare or define your function prototype before the main function. So let's quickly look at what will happen if we don't declare our function prototype. I'm just going to comment this out and then save it. So now let's compile, gcc run func and c underscore function.c. The compiler ran into an error. And what is our error? Let us see what is there. This is a long warning. So warning, implicit declaration of function subtract age. And remember, we have used subtract age without declaring it first. That is why it is saying implicit. It doesn't know that it has to go to the end of the program to find the function subtract age. So this is the error you will get if you try to compile without declaring your function prototype in this particular format. So you look at this, you declared your main function and then came down to write your user-defined function, which is the subtract age. So the program, you've asked it to read diffs subtract age. This line is supposed to execute, then this line, then this line before reading this. Okay, so when you bring in your function prototype like here, in this manner, it is going to know that in order to perform this, you have to read the end and return to continue. So guys, remember, when you are declaring your function at the end of the main, then you have to bring in a function prototype. So the function prototype contains the return type, that is int here, that is the return type. Then the function name. Then it is going to contain the type 1 and take in argument 1. So type 1 is int, argument 1 is a. Then type 2 is also int, argument 2 is also b. And argument 1 and 2 are relating to these variables we declared here. Age 1 is to a and age 2 is to b. So this is how we use user-defined functions in C. Remember, you can post your questions, you can post your suggestions in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Till next time. Ciao.